Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lamar University's webinar, Women in Transportation, Port and Terminal Management. I'd like to give a shout out to Eric Stromberg for his hard work in putting this panel together, and to Sadie Sheik of the Port of Beaumont for her vision and idea to have this panel all together. We have an exciting lineup ahead of you with very strong women in the maritime industry that have fascinating stories to share about lessons learned, best practices, how we all have been mentored, and where we see room for growth and opportunity. And I just think a really robust discussion that will hopefully provide some positive influence in the roles that in your positions and what you are doing for work in the maritime field today. So the way we're going to do this is there'll be a couple of sessions. One will be a virtual, filmed video recorded session called C-Suite Perspectives, and then we'll move on to a roundtable discussion that will be live and close with Q&A. So have your questions ready, because this is an excellent opportunity to hear from the best of the best in women in the maritime industry. So look forward to hearing from all of you and partnering and working together for a long time to come.
And I've been in the maritime business now 20 years. I'm dating myself by saying that. I can't believe it myself when I say it, but yes, 20 years. And I certainly didn't get here through my academic trail and original positions that I started as a younger person, but found myself here, and I'll share how that came to be. I got my bachelor's degree at the University of Vermont in economics. Went on to work for an insurance company for a little while and decided that wasn't the right fit for me. So I went back to school at the University of Denver, and I got a degree in natural resource and environmental law. And from there, found my way going back to Massachusetts, where to marry my sweetheart from the University of Vermont. So that's what brought me to that state. And I got my first leg of work working for something after my graduate degree for the Department of Environmental Protection, where I helped run our Green Fleet program for the state. I was commuting from a small town called Wareham and to the big city of Boston, and it was pretty treacherous. You know, I'm in California now, but there's a lot of snow and things, and that made the commute quite unbearable. So I decided to kind of put my hat in the ring after 3 years there and look for new work, and ended up getting a job with something called the Governor's Seaport Council that was actually out of the city of Boston, but had a satellite office in a community adjacent to Wareham called Fairhaven. And I ended up getting that job, and was fortunate to work for the governor's office for 6 years for the state of Massachusetts. We had a $300 million bond bill where we invested in the deep water ports of that state. And I learned a lot about infrastructure demands, and we also articulated maritime policy for the governor's office. After 6 years there, the mayor of New Bedford gave me a generous opportunity as a young woman to become the first female director of the Port of New Bedford in its 50-year history. And I worked there for 6 years, really enjoyed that job, getting into operations, learning about port management, port operations, and again, did a lot on the policy level, going out, getting grants and all sorts of things there to really help move that port forward with the fine mayor, Mayor Lang at the time. And then after he decided to jump ship and go off to do different things, I thought, well, maybe it's another opportunity for me to look at new job opportunities. So I put my name in the ring to run this port here, the Port of Hueneme. And I was fortunate to be selected for this post, and I've been here 8 years now. And that kind of 6 + 6 + 8 in those jobs is what got me to my 20 years in the field. So believe it or not, I either wanted to run a chocolate store or be a dentist. So that was the tug of war that I had as a young child, looking at career opportunities, and didn't find my way to either one of those posts. But I do enjoy chocolate, and I don't mind the dentist. To respond to this question, I think it's important to for women to go for it, right? And trailblaze for other women. But I think a real lesson here that women should learn from is that you need to have the courage to apply and to go for it. When I applied for my post here at the Port of Hueneme, there were only 60 applicants, of which there was only one woman, and that was me, and I got the job. If you don't put yourself out there and capitalize on opportunity, you're not going to get that opportunity. So my advice today to you all that are growing your careers and looking to reach CEO levels, we need more women at the CEO level, and it's up to you to go apply for those jobs. We'll mentor, we'll trailblaze, you go for it, and we'll get it done, more women in the field where they should be. I always like to speak to a particular individual that gave me some pretty profound insights that at first I thought was sort of funny, but I've really taken it to heart. And so this is Mayor Lang, who was the mayor of the Port of New Bedford. And when I was taking on this new role as the first female at the job, he brought me into his office and he told me to make a fist. He said, make a fist. And I would sit there and I kind of look at him and I go like this. No, he's like, no, make a fist. And so I'd make a fist. And then he'd take my arm and he'd say, make a fist. And so I'd make a fist and I'd make a fist and I start doing that. And then once I got down to the waterfront, and for those of you that don't know a lot about the Port of New Bedford, it's a big fishing port. And we have about 3,000 burly fishermen on the waterfront. I learned pretty quickly, make a fist. And the moral of the story really is that you can box at the equal weight of men. You just need to make a fist, and they will listen and they will respect, and you can have fine relationships and get things done working together. You're equally as powerful and as strong. Make a fist.
Good afternoon. I'm Phyllis Satoff, Executive Director, CEO for Port Freeport, and I'm happy to be joining you today for the Lamar University Women in Transportation webinar. Maritime industry, I think most people, when they get involved with it, they become very passionate about it, and I'm definitely passionate about the maritime industry. We impact every household through the things that we do, because almost everything we consume, use, build with, drive, it moves over the ocean. So we're connecting the world, and as integrated as we are across the globe now, that's very powerful. And I'm really fortunate to have found my way to the maritime industry, because it's been a great career, but it's not one that I expected when I graduated from high school in West Texas and went on to college. I pursued a degree in accounting and graduated from University of Houston Clear Lake, and started my professional career with one of the large accounting auditing firms in Houston. Ultimately, I made the decision to go to work for a local firm in Lake Jackson, Texas, and they audited Port Freeport, which gave me an inside look at the port and maritime industry. And after 4 years of auditing the port, I had the opportunity to apply for the position of Director of Finance, and went to work in 1992 for Port Freeport. And it was a great move for me, a good one that allowed me to see the world and how ports connect global markets, how they support our industries and manufacturers that rely upon the waterways to move their goods. And there are many rewarding experiences. One, just the people in the maritime industry and the bonds that I've built over my career. But, a lot of things have a long gestation period in the maritime industry. And right now, one of the things that I'm is a highlight for me at this point in my career is the fact that we have broken ground on the Freeport Harbor Channel Improvement Project to deepen and partially widen our channel, which will make Port Freeport the deepest port in Texas. When I joined the maritime industry in 1992, most meetings that I attended, I was often the only female in the room. But I'm going to tell you, I never felt that I didn't belong. The Gulf ports really have been very welcoming. All the port directors and other folks that I, met in the industry were never made me feel that I didn't belong. And maybe that's partly because of my perception as well. I grew up working alongside my father and other men in his side construction business. So it was not unusual for me to be in a working situation with male counterparts. So it's been great. I had great mentors, port directors, and others that helped me as I went through my journey and through my career. And, also just working and appreciating all the people that help contribute to the success of the organization. Encourage you to, if you have a goal, set out a path to achieve it. Also, just understand sometimes the journey is different, and it's the collective experiences that prepare you for those future opportunities. So take the opportunity to do the things that challenge you, that appear difficult, make you uncomfortable, because it's all of those things, again, that will help you and set you up for success in future opportunities. Have grace and compassion. Need to have integrity in everything that you do, and have the grit to endure the challenges and that you may experience along the way, because everything is not instantaneous and it's not always easy. But have that grit and that determination to see it to completion. And having those qualities really empowers you to have pursue your dreams, pursue opportunities, and just excel in your field. Well, I congratulate everyone that is pursuing, an opportunity in the maritime industry. I think it's a great field, and one that you will find very rewarding. And I hope you've got a great panel today of very talented, smart, and successful women in the maritime industry. And along with you, I look forward to hearing what they have to say today. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Lamar University Women in Transportation webinar. I'm excited to be with you here today. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to the program. My name is Lori Taylor. I'm the Executive Port Director and CEO here at the Port of Orange. I've been here a little over 7 years, but I've been in this role as Port Director. I'm kind of new to this position. I've been in this position for 2 years. I started off at Lamar University. I received my Bachelor of Business Administration degree in accounting. And then from there, I became a certified public accountant, which led me into public accounting, which led me down into the path of governmental accounting, where I worked for a local municipality. I actually was able to become the interim city manager there and work in that role. And that's when I heard about the opportunity here at the port. I remember the first time that I took a tour here at the Port of Orange. I fell in love with the port. I had never seen anything like this before, and I was very excited about the opportunity to learn new things because I had never done anything like this before. I knew that day that this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my career. I began my career here at the Port of Orange as the Director of Administration and Finance, which allowed me to work side by side with the Port Director, the FSO, the Economics Development Director, to be able to learn about the day-to-day operations here at the port. I was given opportunities to attend meetings, listen in on conference calls, meet with prospective tenants, current tenants, investors that may be coming to the community, leaders within the community, as well as people in the maritime industry. I found that time to be invaluable. Oftentimes, though, that led me to have to work long hours into the evening and into the weekend to be able to get my normal daily tasks complete. But I found that that time was valuable to me in learning this industry. The Port of Orange is a small landlord-based port, which requires me to have a diverse education in so many different fields that affect the maritime industry, such as rail, marine, real estate, regulatory issues, environmental issues, the list goes on and on. I've learned a lot in the last 2 years, but I have a whole lot more to learn. My career here at the Port has been very rewarding and satisfying. I've been able to meet so many new and interesting people. I've had opportunities to assist businesses to achieve their goals and overcome challenges along the way, which has created jobs and spurred economic development. I can tell you no 2 days are ever the same, and I always look forward to what the next day holds. And looking back over my career, advice that I would give to someone new to the field is to first and foremost is to get your education. Secondly is be a good listener, because you're always going to get more out of it than what you expected. You're going to pick up on things that you didn't originally anticipate. To find a mentor or two that you trust, that you can call upon when you run into a stumbling block, and believe me, you will, that can give you advice and direction. Build relationships both within your organization, outside your organization, in your community, as well as the maritime industry, and experts in the field, because you need people that you can call upon when you just don't have the answer that can give you guidance. Don't be afraid of hard work, perseverance, accept new challenges, step outside of your comfort zone. In closing, enjoy the journey and don't give up when things get difficult, and they will get difficult, but persevere in all that you do because the rewards are going to be so satisfying in the end. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I look forward to hearing what everyone else has to say. Thank you.
Mary Beth?
Now we'd like to turn it over to Brandy Christian, who has some live remarks that will complete and round out our C-suites perspective section of the program today. So let me turn it over to Brandy.
Certainly. Thank you, Mary Beth. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to join you virtually, at least today. Thank you to Lamar University and to Eric Stromberg and the team there for inviting me to participate along with my impressive colleagues you just heard from. And thank you for accommodating my travel schedule, something that is pretty typical in this industry today. I think to start out with, I can say after 20 years in the industry, you have certainly chosen a very exciting and challenging career industry. It'll take you many places, and I guarantee you a variety of work experiences. I can't say that a week has gone by that I've been bored in the last 20 years. Ports are increasingly dynamic as the supply chain and logistics is increasingly dynamic. So it's a tremendous rewarding career. Historically, as you know, maritime is one of the most historic industries. It was the first mode of transportation for moving people and goods. And it's had to evolve over time, and it's evolving every day. I think it's going to be even more crucial. You're seeing it, particularly with e-commerce. The pressures and the demands on maritime shipping will only increase, and its reliance on ports will only increase. So it's a field that's ever evolving and exciting. As I mentioned, I've been in the maritime industry about 20 years. And I think, as my colleagues kind of described, I found myself here on accident as well. It was kind of a path that I meandered over time. But as way of background, my undergraduate studies were actually, my undergraduate was University of Arizona. I was a double major in political science and Asian studies. I knew from my very first course that I wanted to work in government and public sector. I was very much drawn to the idea of service, but I also loved the international flair. I thought I would actually go into foreign service or something like the CIA, et cetera, working internationally. And as life happens and things move along, I ended up going to get my graduate degree at USC in public administration and policy. And during that time in Los Angeles at USC, I had opportunities that kind of changed my path a little bit. But the one thing that stayed common, I knew very much that I wanted to work within the public sector. After working for a short time in government relations and then taking my first real big career opportunity was with one of the big 5 accounting firms. I didn't know I had that in common with Phyllis, and unlike Lori and Phyllis, I wasn't on the accounting side, I was on the consulting side. But that really exposed me to a number of public agencies. And after a few years, I decided, okay, it's time to get my experience in-house in a public agency, and decided I wanted to move to San Diego, California. And I had applied to the Port of San Diego, and it wasn't because it was a port, it was a public agency, wanted to gain experience. And I stumbled into this 14-year career with the port that really just transformed my entire path. I instantly loved the port industry because it was this dynamic blend of private sector and public sector. As ports, we operate with all of the political challenges, sometimes the government red tape, the community expectations and engagement and planning that we have to do as agencies, very much a government function, but yet every single one of our customers are private sector. And we as ports have to manage that every day. It's incredibly dynamic, challenging at times, and really takes a broad skill set to manage. But I absolutely loved it. And over the 14 years at the Port of San Diego, I had opportunity to grow, take over responsibilities in different functions. By the time I left there, after 14 years, I was the vice president of strategy and business development, responsible for the maritime functions of the organization. I left to take an opportunity here at the Port of New Orleans about 6 years ago. And that was as the chief operating officer, the first female to hold an executive position in the history of the agency. It's about a 120-year-old agency. About 4 years ago, I was promoted to chief executive officer. And since that time, we actually bought a short line railroad. So I also serve as the president of the New Orleans Public Belt Railroad as well. So I've been here in New Orleans for about 6 years now. And as I said, I kind of meandered into the industry, but certainly have no regrets. And it is something after 20 years that I feel like sometimes I feel like I started a new job last week, because there's just so many different issues and new dynamics that come into play, that it's a career that keeps you on your toes and is extremely rewarding. And it's very encouraging to see more and more women moving into the management levels within the port industry. And, we still have work to do when it comes to female representation, to minority representation. But it's really through efforts like this that really outreach and showcase to young women, to minorities, that they have opportunity in this industry. And there are people just like them that sit in leadership roles or are moving up the ranks within an organization. So I thank Lamar University for providing the opportunity. And I'd be happy to jump into questions as you like.
Thank you so much, Brandy. I think you all will agree that we've heard from 4 terrific C-suite executives in our port industry. And really, Brandy did a great job of rounding out that session of our 4 different leaders, women leaders in the industry. So that concludes our C-suite portion. It's called C-suite Perspectives portion of the agenda. Now we're going to move into our roundtable discussion, where we're going to hear a little bit from industry leaders and rising stars who are going to discuss and respond to some questions that we put together about their experience as women in the industry. But first, let me introduce myself and a little bit about what we're going to talk about. So welcome. Again, my name is Mary Beth Long, and I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Workforce Development at the American Association of Port Authorities. And I'm just so honored to be here today to help facilitate our roundtable discussion. I've worked in Washington, D.C. for my whole career, both in legislative and public affairs, and have always worked in transportation. It was during my first job at a law firm, where I was a little naive, I began my journey in transportation working with the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association, so a bunch of truck drivers. And little did I know that that journey would lead me on a cross-country exploratory road trip in the back of a tractor trailer. It led me to board a vessel by Jacob Slatter off of a pilot boat at the Port of New York and New Jersey in January, and I think Lillian may have been there watching me try to do that. And then it led me to standing on top of one of the tallest cranes at the Port of Portland in high heels. So I haven't always been equipped. Certainly my outfits have not been equipped for some of the adventures I've gone on, but I gotta tell you, it has been an amazing journey. I've loved every minute of it. It's exciting, and it's a great industry filled with some of the greatest people I've met in all of my career, the most interesting issues and challenges. And to be truthful, if given the opportunity, I would do it all over again. So, okay, so how did I end up facilitating this, this webinar? Well, AAPA and Lamar University have enjoyed an amazing partnership for a long time in professional and workforce development. And we've really had a very close working relationship. Eric Stromberg and Lamar University have been real champions of continuing education for port management and port leaders. They've really shown an incredible amount of leadership in that area. In fact, the Center for Port Management at Lamar University in Beaumont, Texas was established in 2015. And Eric, who is actually the former CEO of AAPA, also was the head of the North Carolina State Ports Authority, has been executive director since the center's inception. So he has a lot of background, a lot of connection, and a lot of partners in the industry. And so it makes a lot of sense that he would continue his partnership with AAPA. The center offers a fully online Master of Science degree in Port and Terminal Management, and half of the 12-course curriculum is taught remotely by industry experts serving as adjunct faculty. The center also hosts continuing education programs such as today's webinar, Women in Transportation. And they would love, I know Eric and his colleague Candace Moore would love for you to explore the opportunities that are available at Lamar University by looking in your chat box. You'll be able to see the web address, but in case you are wondering, it's lamar.edu/port management. But also feel free to call Eric or Candace after this webinar and just have a conversation about how you can get more involved in port management discussion, education, and professional development. Also, I don't know if you know this, but AAPA has an MOU with Lamar. As I mentioned earlier, we've had a partnership for a long time. And in the MOU, it states that our PPM graduates, of which several people online are also PPM graduates, which is really cool, both female and certified. And you can receive up to 15 towards the their master's program at Lamar. So that's also an incredible incentive to continue your education and grow and build your career in the transportation industry. Okay, so this webinar, it was inspired by an AAPA member, a PPM candidate, and a big supporter of Lamar University, Sade Chick of the Port of Beaumont. She's someone I've worked closely with and is a real up and coming leader in the industry and has so many different amazing ideas and has been such an inspiration for us. She wanted to highlight the role of women in transportation industry and to hear about their experiences working in port and terminal management in particular. You know, it's a great idea to focus on women in transportation as it's really not always a career pathway that is top of mind for many women. Upon hearing Sade's idea, a group of us got together, we did a little brainstorming, came up with a plan to spark some interest and enthusiasm for the many opportunities there are for women in this industry. And I don't think people realize how many opportunities there really are. You've already heard, as I mentioned before, from an incredible slate of C-suite port executives who have given you a little glimpse into their role and into their worlds. And in fact, at AAPA, we have been really fortunate that 12% of our member ports are led by women, which is actually 2 times the number of females in top positions at Fortune 500 companies. So that's kind of a cool little stat and something we're very proud of for sure. As you can see, women make amazing leaders. They have a lot of natural characteristics that help them to excel at their jobs. And I think you've seen some of those characteristics in these introductory remarks. You know, women are empathetic, listeners, nurturing, they're great with their staffs and in professional development. And they have a great focus on teamwork. And of course, we're all great multitaskers. I'm sure that doesn't come as a surprise. So in this next segment, we want to go a little deeper and hear from some other professionals in the industry, both past and present, so you can better understand their journeys and perhaps may even spark some creativity in your own career pathway. I will say there are a couple people missing from our conversation today that would have probably made our panel a little more diverse, but they weren't able to join us. But never fear, this is actually part one of a part two, or at least part three series of webinars. The part two series will have later in the summer, will have a greater emphasis on equity, diversity, and inclusion. So we're really excited to continue to have these conversations and talk about our industry in new and changing and different ways. So first, I'm going to turn the program over to the next group of panelists. They're going to give a few remarks, and then we're going to turn it over to some Q&A. So the first person that's just going to open us up, she's going to introduce herself, but is actually saving her remarks for the beginning of the Q&A, is Sade Chick at the Port of Beaumont. She is the Director of Corporate Affairs. Then we're going to hear from Lauren Brand, who's President of the National Association of Waterfront Employers. Then we'll move to Helen Brohl, Executive Director of the U.S. Committee on Marine Transportation System, or the CMTS. And Lillian Barone, who I've known for all my career at AAPA, who is a port industry leader and someone who is very well regarded and respected within our industry. So let me turn it over first to Sade, and we'll move through and have some comments, and then I'll take back the microphone, so to speak, and we'll have a little bit of a Q&A discussion.
Good afternoon. I am excited to be here. I have mentioned it before, regardless of whether you're looking at women or men in maritime, I am on a panel with maritime giants. They are really incredible women, and I'm excited to be here to provide a perspective from someone who is new to the industry. I have about 4 years in the maritime industry, and it was not a straight path. I'll just provide a little bit of background information on how I got here. So I have lived in 4 cities that have been port cities. I grew up in Portland, Maine. I lived and worked in Providence, Rhode Island. I lived and worked near Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and now I'm in Beaumont, Texas. And 2 of those cities have the word port in them. Yet I had no clue what a port did until I was in my late 20s and moved to Beaumont. So I'm excited to talk about that and how that in and of itself is a challenge that we're facing on building familiarity for kids, students, anyone from a really young age of the importance of ports. And I'm hoping that through this discussion, we can start the process of making maritime as easy to talk about as the weather. I mean, it's sunny out, and ports are responsible for 26% of the GDP. Did you know that? I mean, it'll be real natural, hopefully by the end of this webinar, and I'm excited about that. When I moved to Providence, I ended up getting my master's, and it had a concentration in global business leadership and marketing. And I always kind of leaned towards the marketing side of things, but because of the global business leadership component, I took a trade class, and that's kind of where I was first exposed to ports and got the bug. And I never thought I would be qualified enough to work for a port. And that's another thing I'm looking forward to talking about, is that pathway that we can establish so women feel confident in entering industries that they're not familiar with or that are male dominated. So I ended up moving to Texas a couple of years later, was the Vice President of Economic Development for the Greater Beaumont Chamber of Commerce, and then kind of fell into my position at the port, which has evolved over the last 4 years.
Thank you, Sade. All right, let's go to Lauren.
You'd think after 1 year of being on Zoom, I'd learn how to unmute. Thank you very much. Thank you to Lamar University and AAPA for inviting me to participate in the panel. I'm actually very honored to be here and with such an august group and many that I'm pleased to call my friends as well. I was asked to spend just a few minutes to talk about my background and how I got to where I am as president of Terminal Management Association. When I was in college, I went through many, many majors, from drama through anthropology, a zillion of them. My dad sat me down towards the end of my junior year and said, you have to focus. And I think you should focus on transportation. You're born in the middle of the baby boomers. You're at a college that offers a transportation university. Then you're strong enough to be a woman in a man's world. And transportation will never go out of style. It's not the buggy whip. It's the people who carry the buggy whip and everything that follows it. So I listened to Dad because he helped me with the homework. Dad ran a trucking company. It was an easy decision for me. And I then graduated. And when I graduated, I quit the job I had being a bank teller. And I answered an ad to be a dispatcher and a claims clerk at a transportation company. The first day, and I promise this will not be a long story, but the first day I showed up on the job, the owner's wife came up to me and said, "Oh, you're the new claims clerk. Come over here." And she handed me a list of paper that had 96 names and addresses on it. And she handed me a 2-page letter and said, "Every one of these has to be typed original." This is before computers. So I looked at her and I thought, oh my goodness, I could type, but this is not what I went to college for. So I sat there and I faked it. And I went like this. And for 10 minutes, she let me hunt and peck the letters. And then I thought, how long is she going to make me do this? And finally she said, "Oh, I see you can't type." Okay. She took the letter and the list away from me and she said, "Go make coffee, please." I was like, of course, absolutely. I mean, it's my new job. I can't say no. And I'm thinking in my head, they didn't teach me how to do this in college, but okay, mom taught me how to make coffee. So I went into the kitchen area and I put the coffee pot together and I deliberately took the carafe and put it on top of the coffee machine. So all the water in the coffee dripped out all over the kitchen. And she came to me and she said, "Oh, okay, you don't have to make coffee." And then her husband came and saved me and said, "Here's the dispatcher's desk." And that was the beginning of my career in the work world. And I learned to stand up for myself. After that, I learned some lessons. And so I'd like to just share some of the lessons with you. The first one is fake it till you make it. It really works. When I was 24 years old, I bought a set of Mikimoto pearls and matching earrings, and I wore them every day for 3 years until I eventually was seen as management material. And I became the head of a national program at, believe it or not, Brandy Christian and Phyllis Satoff, one of the big 8 accounting firms, Arthur Andersen, which was a good firm back then. And I wasn't in accounting or consulting, I was in the tax division. So there's the 6 degrees of separation of accounting firms for us in transportation, I guess. What didn't work for me was dressing like the guys. I used to try to wear the pinstripe suits that were very popular in New York back then. And I had the silk blouse with the floppy, silky bow tie. And the guys finally came to me and said, "We don't want you looking like us. We want you looking like you." So I figured out what was my style. And my style is bright colors and an elegant look. And I still use it for this day. And it just makes me more comfortable. And when I'm more comfortable, people around me are more comfortable. Second one is, I always thought that sick feeling in the pit of my stomach in the morning meant I was supposed to hide that day because something bad was going to happen to me. And I thought that was women's intuition. One day I stuck my neck out and I survived to live the evening. And after that, I thought, wow, that sick feeling in my stomach doesn't mean hide. It actually means I'm going to learn something new that day. So now when I have that feeling, I thought, this is excitement, not sick women's intuition. And it's excitement about what's going to come up that day. And that evening, I make sure that I stop and reflect on what did I learn that was new that day. And so I carry that forward with me. And I think that being curious, because that's what it is, it's curious, will allow you to continue to grow. The third thing that I found is scarcity versus positivity is a real thing. I cannot recall the names of all the people who tried to halt my career. And knowing I was speaking here, I actually spent some time trying to think of those gosh darn people that tried to stop me along the way. But what I do remember is all the people who helped me along the way. I remember Frank Walsh at Arthur Andersen, who took me to the fanciest restaurant in New York City and taught me how to order lunch and which utensil to use. And I remember Wally Bidwell, the husband who saved me from making coffee and took me to the rail yards and learned me how to teach that, how to run that business. And I remember Chuck Rowland, who showed me Port Canaveral through his vision so I could see what's possible versus what's inside or what's right in front of me. I remember Conrad Everhard, who taught me how important it is to look beyond your backyard and see what's going on in the world and how it will impact you in the future. I remember Roger Bonnert, who taught me how to whiteboard and the secret to cracking a solid silver sphere with no cracks in it. But he taught me how to get into it and to find the problem inside of it and how to strategize actionable solutions. And Roger and I are still good friends this day. Joel Zabat believed in me and said I would be an excellent member of the U.S. Senior Executive Service. And he told me, if you're in my office too much, you aren't doing your job. Trust yourself and go do it. And I remember Chip Janikin. And by the way, over the years, I've had a lot of harassment issues. I think it's just because I was early in the career and quite often the first female that they saw in a job. And I never complained because I thought complaining wasn't going to allow me to win anything. And one time I was demeaned by a senior member of the federal government before 17 other co-workers. I didn't say a word, but somebody else, another lady in the room did. And the word got back to Chip Janikin, who was head of the agency at the time. And he came to my defense, and he went up to that person's office and took them to account and told them they were never again to do that to anyone in his field, in his office or agency. And then he came in my office that Friday afternoon at 6 o'clock and said, by the way, this is what I've done. And I just want you to know that person won't bother you ever again. And I cried. I cried because I was in my 50s and no one had ever stood up for me before. And I remember Admiral Busby, who supported all my efforts to change how the US DOT perceives ports and terminals. I remember my dad, but most of all, and almost at the end, I remember my husband who listens to me with infinite patience and says, darling, now's your time to shine. And he's been saying that to me ever since he's known me for 20 years. Now is your time to shine. So I never tried to be a woman in a man's world. I just always worked at being the best person for the job. Here's my advice. Find your core values, then find your passion and work at your passion while holding true to your values. And I've got to quote my friends, Kristen and Phyllis, pursue without fear, with grace and determination. And I love what Lori said, enjoy the journey. And now I think I turn it over to Helen.
Thank you, Lauren. Yep, sorry, do you need to go ahead?
No, I was
Mary Beth.
just agreeing with Lauren. Thank you. And just transitioning over to Helen. Thank you for joining us, Helen.
It's a pleasure. Thanks so much for the invitation. Thank you, Eric Stromberg from Lamar, and thank you, Mary Beth from AAPA. Mary Beth and I go way back. Some of the things that we're very proud of, co-wrote legislation that we're very proud of today. I know I am. Did quite a bit of advocacy together, and those are things you never forget, and friends you never forget, and I'm so grateful for that. You know, I come from the Great Lakes. I'm a very proud Lake Erie area gal, and my dad was a port director, and later in life, my younger brother went to the Great Lakes Maritime Academy and had a really great career as a captain on ore carriers in the Great Lakes. And I grew up on water and boats and all those things. So it is not surprising that I was drawn to maritime transportation. The fact is, though, my education was not. I was a undergrad in coastal geology, and it wasn't until I got to Ohio State for grad school that I took a policy course and started to find a sense of what I would like. But I'm a late bloomer. And I say that to all those folks who still at the age of 28, 29, like I was, who still said, what am I going to do when I grow up? I have no idea what I really want to do. The advice I got, well, I got I say luck, but in fact, I really do believe that luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. I truly believe that. When I got to Washington, D.C., even then, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And I'm 30 years old. So if you're still a person who's not sure what you're doing, don't sweat it so much. I learned from a really terrific guy who at the time was the chief scientist at NOAA. And I asked him, there I was, 29, 30 years old, saying, I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. Who said, well, you know, I kind of had a career where, you know, I just kind of did what I really loved every day. And along the way, I discovered some great stuff and did some great stuff. And then next thing you know, they have this career. Now, I know that's easily said, because if we could wave a wand and go to the career we really love, we would all just do that. But I think the most important thing that I tell folks, I do a lot of mentoring still. I pay back to Ohio State with the John Glenn graduate program by mentoring and providing some seminars. And I think the most important thing is to not be so worried that any decision you make at any given time in your life is the last one and the only one that you're going to make. But you can't say yes to a job and you can't say yes to an opportunity if you don't put yourself out there. It's very easy when you think, should I apply for this job? Am I qualified for this job? And you question yourself, well, what if it doesn't work out? What if I have to move? What if my family doesn't like it? What if? But you can't say no to a job or decide you don't want it if you don't apply in the beginning. The worst that can happen is you don't get chosen, but maybe you learn something about the process. The best that happens is you get the job, but maybe you take it, maybe you don't. That's a wonderful choice to have. Those experiences lead one thing to another. When I went to On the Hill, I was doing budget reviews. I was with a committee, the Merchant Marine Fisheries Committee, which doesn't exist anymore, but I know Eric Stromberg's laughing about that because it does date us just a wee bit. But it was a great experience back when there was a real maritime transportation committee on the Hill, whose job it was all the time to think about maritime transportation, not just a subcommittee. Every time I looked at a piece of legislation or I looked at programs in NOAA or programs elsewhere, I kept thinking about this maritime kind of connection. So it is no surprise that I kind of got my way through that and eventually went to the St. Lawrence Seaway Development Corporation. So I asked somebody at NOAA if I could go sit on an interagency roundtable that was being developed. And the guy, I said, well, yeah, go for me. Wow. Because I saw it in a newspaper. We didn't have internet back then. I read about it. Next thing you know, I'm sitting at a table. That guy offered me a job. And because of that connection, I got myself to the Port of Chicago. Because of those connections, when I moved to New Jersey, because I married a guy from Jersey, they called me out of Chicago. Someone called me and said, hey, you want to apply for this job? Now, you know, ideally, we would all, you know, I'd like to say it's all luck. A lot of it is a little bit of luck, being in the right place at the right time. But again, I think I was prepared emotionally and I was ready for it. I'm going to make reference to Lauren's comment about being, you know, in her 50s and still questioning. Don't be worried if it isn't until your 50s that you really have it all together. I think by the time I turned 50, I had the confidence and the sense of myself and who I was. And more importantly, I was willing to recognize that I was really sometimes the smartest person in the room. And that's a big deal. So don't be surprised if you're 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, and you're the smartest person in the room. Sometimes discretion is a better part of valor, and you don't want to let everybody know it. But knowing it, having confidence in that is really important because there will be a time when you can be offered that. So as we go forward, I think the most important part is supporting each other. I'm blown away by the fact that 12% of AAPA's membership are women running ports. That's huge, and that hasn't been. That's somewhat recent that we've had that statistic. So I want to keep at it. More importantly, let's all stick together and support each other. And I know any one of us are here for follow-up. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Helen. Let's wrap up with Lillian, who's going to give some opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Mary Beth. I'm delighted to thank you at AAPA and Eric at Lamar University for the invitation to participate today. Like everyone else, I'm passionate about the industry and our communities, and I'm really hopeful that as we get into the roundtable, we'll have the chance to share some ideas and some specific opportunities to exchange thoughts about what we can do to help each other. You know, listening to everyone who has spoken so far, I find that we really do have many similarities. I've had a serendipitous career path as well. I started by going to college in Washington and working in my senior year in a planning agency in Washington, D.C., planning the Washington metro system. But I realized very soon that I wasn't going to advance in that organization without a degree in urban planning or engineering, neither of which I had. My degree was in political science. So I started looking around and realized, as I saw one of my roommates working in Congress for a representative from Ohio, that because I could type, I didn't want to wind up typing constituent letters all day long. So instead, I started looking at jobs at the federal agencies and found an opportunity at USDOT, where I became a specialist, a transportation technician at the predecessor agency of the Federal Transit Administration, which was called UMTA in those days, and went on from there to a career in public transportation, where I was able to move from USDOT to the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, managing and applying for and running federal grants for the transit system in our organization, PATH. I used the opportunity of working at the Port Authority to really learn about the multiple businesses of the Port Authority, to get a master's degree in civil engineering using their tuition refund program, which I'm hopefully going to talk a little bit about later, and volunteering, really having the opportunity, because I was encouraged to do so by mentors within the organization, including my own boss, to spend time at the Transportation Research Board on projects, to spend time in creating activity in support of the transit community, where we created the American Public Transit Association, and doing a number of things that gave me the chance to meet people from around the country, to learn from them, to hone my own skills, and to develop a network of individuals, both in the public and private agencies, that I could call on, or who could call on me. And that really led me to an understanding of the world that was very different than just being in either the federal organization or in the Port Authority itself. I went on a serendipitous journey, went back to Washington as a political appointee for a number of years, became a lobbyist for a couple of years, and then was invited to come back by the Port Authority because I had training in strategic planning to work in the aviation department. And that's what I meant before about learning about the multiple businesses of the agency. I learned the language pretty quickly and was able to really excel in the organization, creating a new future for the regional airports. And as a result of that, I got invited to run a new department, management and budget. And after that, for 4.5 years, I got invited, listen to this, invited to become the port director. I had never even had a thought that I could be a maritime director. I really wanted to be the aviation director one day. But the opportunity arose, and I pondered it overnight for a weekend and said, if I don't take this opportunity, I may not be offered a second chance at a line department directorship. And I really wanted to have that. I had spent a lot of time learning about operations, and that's why I got a master's in engineering. So I took it. I was worried that I wouldn't get along with labor. That was not the problem at all. I got along well with the labor leadership because I could show them and they could understand that we really had common goals and common interests, and that if we worked together, we could achieve tremendous change in the harbor. And of course, over the years, we were able to do that. I am, I guess, a senior voice because I started my port career in the 80s. And as I look back on my career, I would say I was fortunate to have had the opportunities to achieve and lead that set the stage for other women. I was the first woman in the Port Authority's history to run a facility, an operating facility. I ran the truck terminals and I ran bus facilities. Other people succeeded because they were given the opportunity, because I had done it and not fallen completely flat on my face. I had issues certainly, but I was successful. I was someone who, as I said, volunteered. So I volunteered my time after WTS, the Women's Transportation Seminar, was created in 1977, I think. And I joined in 1978 when I went to Washington the second time. And over the years, I found I was so enamored with WTS and what we could do for each other as women and men who were then members of WTS and are now, that I became national president. And that was a wonderful opportunity and experience. I became the first woman to chair TRB, and I've had other firsts along the way, including being the second behind Ann Aylward female port director in the US and in fact at the time in the world. So all of those opportunities were not conscious goals, but they were things that set the stage for me to turn around and reach back, to be able to give other people, other women, whether it was staff or women in other organizations or in other communities, the opportunity to continue to do similar things and to perhaps take some lessons from stumbles that I made along the way. I never set out to be a trailblazer. I always had in my mind the need to work hard, to learn as much as possible, to overcome obstacles, to contribute value, definitely to overcome my shyness, and to continually challenge myself to be prepared to meet opportunities with the best possible performance. As Helen said, opportunity and preparation really do collide and give you the chance to really succeed if you are ready to take the challenge. I will stop there because I have a lot more to say, but Eric's given me a task and I will try my best to listen to what others say. That's one of our lessons from one of our CEOs. Listen to what others say and try to feed that back in ways that will make sense to others, not just today, but in the long term in our community. So thanks.
Thank you, Lillian. Again, an amazing panel of women we've heard from in this part 2 for our roundtable discussion. I've already been so inspired by their words, but we're going to dig a little bit deeper. We prepared, as I mentioned, some questions we'd like to ask some of the panelists so that they can kind of give us a little deeper insight into some specific areas that we've gotten input that may be very meaningful for the audience today. So I'm going to start with Sade. Sade, I'd like to ask you a question. I think this might be perfect for you. Were there inequities or any subtle barriers, big hurdles, or anything uncomfortable situations that you had to overcome through your career in the industry? And if so, what could help to change this? What challenges were you facing?
I think I'm fortunate to be on the side where I have benefited from the challenges that Lauren, Lillian, Helen, you, Brandy, Lori, Phyllis, Kristen, you've all faced, and that has kind of made my path a little easier and more streamlined. The biggest challenge I've faced is lack of information about the industry. And so I think that's really, like, going forward, that's going to be the biggest challenge that women who are interested in entering the industry, we've heard from everyone who's spoken that the path isn't really clear cut, and you might be going in accounting, you might be doing environmental work, you might be a lawyer. Well, there's still a place for you in the maritime industry. And I think had I known that, I could have made different decisions that helped me enter the industry a little sooner when I wanted to, because I would have had the knowledge and the experience to be able to do that. And that would have been really helpful. And I hope that as I move forward in my career, those sort of things can be developed, those stepping stones can be identified. So if a 4th grader decides they want to be the captain of a vessel one day, they know exactly how to do that, and they know who to reach out to and what that process is in those steps. And I think the biggest part of that is finding a mentor. And you asked about barriers. I think there's a lot of barriers associated with that. When you think about a mentor, you think about this extensive process of finding this one individual who can be able to tell you exactly what you need to go down this path and end up in this location. And that's not what it is. I mean, mentors come in so many shapes and sizes. It can be somebody just giving you this little nugget that you hold on to that becomes a guiding principle in your life. And I think that's one thing we as women could do is just lean in and put ourselves out there and offer to be mentors. And I think sometimes it's a little bit of, you get self-conscious because you don't feel like you have the information to give to somebody that they would find valuable. And I think everybody has something to give and can be a mentor for someone. And so I think that's the biggest barrier, is finding that mentor, identifying that. And I hope one day we can put something together. I mean, I really believe that if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. So maybe from this, we can develop a coffee and conversation with women in maritime, where students can get together with port leaders and ask questions and try to see if maybe it's the right path for them and make that more accessible.
Well said, Sade. And I think you make a great point, which is we just sometimes don't know, or women don't know about the opportunities. They just haven't heard about it. So creating awareness is such a big piece of that. And I do think this is a great jumping off point for those kinds of conversations. Now I want to turn it back over to and ask Helen and Lauren a question that might be kind of interesting for us to hear. So what is one problem that you may have seen in the past, say over the last 30 or 40 years, that is still an issue today in your work? And conversely, what has changed? So what stayed the same? What's changed? Where do we need to go from here?
I'm going to have Lauren go first so I can think on that a little bit.
Thanks, Helen.
Yeah.
I do know something that men talking over women in meetings. It's in years. I've felt as if I were invisible, and it's happened so often that I actually sometimes got so angry that I would stand up, and I would still keep my voice quiet, but I would stand up so they would physically have to see me and recognize that I was in the room and that I was talking, and I would continue trying to say what I was trying to say while they're talking over me. I now know that's called mansplaining, and it's really irritating. And what's changed is that young women come up to me now, because I am a mentor for quite a few people, and they ask me, has that ever happened to me in the past? And I'm like, oh my God, it's still happening? How does it change? And if I am in a meeting and I hear men talking over a younger woman, I'll actually now deepen my voice, which means it carries further. It's like a theater voice. And I'll say, excuse me, so-and-so had a great idea, and she was talking about it before you rudely interrupted her. Could we please finish listening to her? And then you'll see a pin drop. And the last time I did it, the next time someone wanted to talk, the guys would raise their hand and be called on like a teacher. But I don't know when we got so rude and when people didn't recognize that. That's my story.
Yeah, I have to agree. There's a lot of mansplaining going on, and you have to learn to recognize it so you don't take it personally. I think one thing that is still the same is how overall there's still too few women in leadership positions generally. So I work for the federal government. And the CMTS is it's a interagency, interdepartmental maritime policy coordinating committee. So our members are maritime related or maritime interested agencies. So we have, it's a cabinet level committee, but we have a sub-cabinet group, which meets quarterly, and sub-cabinet tend to be the head of agencies. And we will have 25 people sitting around. It'll be, the head of MARAD and a 2-star from, the head of navigation for the Army Corps, and goes around civilian and military. And what is still so obvious here is that there's going to be some women there, but the heads of things tend to be men. And just by coincidence not by coincidence, but of the 15 years that I've been at this job, and that means that every year there's been a different director or different chairperson of that sub-cabinet group. And only once has there been a woman, and that was the chief of staff at NOAA. We had someone who was temporary, but that was very brief. And it's always been men. So those folks that are in the military side, which in military is very dominantly male oriented. Armed forces have some of the least number of women percentages still, although I'll tell you, they only rank lower in terms of gender diversity, lower than military or Homeland Security. Department of Homeland Security has less women. Department of Justice has less women than military. And you know what department has the least percentage of women? The Department of Transportation. How ironic is that? So what has not changed? Still just men dominating. In my case, it's head of an agency. There's rumor that this president wants to have a woman head of the Maritime Administration. Wow, Can you imagine? There's, lots of talk about women in lots of positions, but talk is cheap, so we'll see. So that's still leadership positions, whether it's in industry or whether it's in the public sector, still very much dominated by men.
Thank Lauren. I was just reminded of a story. Once I was a lot younger, I was a lobbyist, and I was in a NAFTA meeting with a bunch of Teamsters, and they'd asked me to update. And I think I may have been the only woman. I'm also 5'2". I was young. So it's hard to get anyone to take you seriously, period. And I kept trying to talk and kept trying to talk. And finally, this fellow, really nice, giant, gentle giant, 6'5" Teamster, pulled me up on a big chair. He said, "Come on, shut up, listen to her. She has something important to say." So I always about that in terms of commanding a room. So yeah, it's always easy to get your point across. And sometimes when you are not advantaged with, height, which I'm not, it's even more challenging. So
I remember once I went to, when I was at the Port of Chicago, the longshoremen were the most gracious to me. And I went to meetings, and I was certainly the only woman on the south side of Chicago, let alone at a ILA meeting, and gracious, listened, chatted, clearly treated me the best.
Yep, I would say that's true. All right, so I'd like to ask a question of Lillian, just because you have such an interesting background and history and pathway, to where you eventually ended up at the Port of New York and New Jersey. But what would have made that pathway to your career in the industry a little easier? I mean, were there things that along the way could have made it simpler or better for you as you moved through your career pathway?
I would say that having the opportunity earlier in my career to be engaged in operations would have been very helpful. Whether it was transit or bus or truck, it wouldn't have mattered. Just understanding the techniques and strategies that one uses in operations, understanding the issues that are common on a daily basis, being able to have the opportunity to speak with people who are in similar positions to see what they did and why they did it and how they resolved problems. Having had a little bit of training would have been very useful. But in the days that I'm talking about, in the 70s, since women weren't expected to be in operations, there wasn't any of that really available, even at the most junior supervisory or administrative level. Women just were not in the field. So I think that would have been helpful, because it might have given me slightly different perspective as I moved up in the organization. But one of the things I didn't mention, in the late 70s, before I went back to DOT, a group of us got together and created a group called Women's Equity. It was right after the Justice Department had settled with AT&T about discrimination in the workplace. And many organizations were, including ours, were very fearful that if women started agitating, they could be facing similar kinds of suits. So we got together and decided we wouldn't agitate, we would just do something very creative. We created our group. We started bringing in speakers from the outside, like, people, very famous people you would know. And we started educating ourselves, and we made a pact that we would help each other prepare for and learn approaches that would get us through the tests that we would have to take in order to move into supervisory positions. It worked. And then the men of the organization wanted to join us, because when you have a Gloria Steinem coming in to talk to the women of the organization, the men want to hear what she has to say, because they wanted, I think, as much to defend themselves as anything else. So that gave us the initiative and the ability to work with our HR folks and create the kind of more open training that was necessary for women to start succeeding in the organization.
That's great, Lillian. I love hearing all the creativity that surrounds us. It sounds like there's some really great ideas for ways we can continue to do that. And I think this coffee idea, this coffee and conversations taking off, I can see in the chat. So we may be onto something coming out of this. So I want to pivot a little bit and just kind of open it up to all of, honestly, to any of the folks who were on the roundtable discussion and anyone else who has stuck around, like Brandy or Phyllis, if you want to pipe in answering this question. What are some ways that we can create awareness generally and tell young women in particular about the cool opportunities in the port, maritime, and freight transportation sectors? I think it's, as I mentioned before, it's hard to get their attention because people just don't necessarily think of the industry as an opportunity or place for their career. So how can we get women, to think about careers in this field? And I'm sure there's some creative ideas already brewing. Maybe there's things already happening, but feel free to jump in, and I'll try to manage the conversation if we have more than one person jumping in. But I don't know, I saw Brandy perk up. I don't know if you wanted to start, and then we can just kind of go around and have others.
I'd be happy to. I think this is a challenge, both with females as well as other minorities within the industry. When I took over here in New Orleans, one of my focus was to try to increase the diversification of particularly the top of the organization. And, I'm in a market where there was a really high need. There was unemployment, there was talent, not a lot of executive positions available within New Orleans. And I thought, okay, we go out there, we outreach and put out these positions, then we'll get tons of applicants. And I rarely got a female or a minority applicant. And in some cases, it's expected in certain technical fields, just like you see women attracted to certain disciplines, tends to be your pool of candidates. And we really struggled with that. We tried to go to associations like the Hispanic Chamber, the African American Chamber, different groups like that. And I think the thing that struck me was if you're in an industry and a network that is predominantly Caucasian male, that is your network. And so if you're going to that pool, that's likely going to be your pool of candidates. And so we really had to, kind of step outside the box and go not just to associations, but actually looking into other industries and then expand our own personal networks. And I think that's how we get other females and minorities interested, is when they see people like themselves in leadership roles. And so quite often we get so busy, asked to do presentations for chambers of commerce and, important initiatives, projects we're working on, but taking the time to go to groups where there are young leaders that are searching and setting out on their career path to talk about the opportunities. Because unfortunately, the maritime industry can be very closed and difficult to navigate. People just aren't sure how to get a job on the river, as we say here. And often you think, oh, I don't have any I think Sadie said it, I don't have any experience in maritime. They'd never even consider me. So I think the more we can go out there networking as leaders, but also we have started going out at young ages into high schools and having maritime sessions where we have everyone from harbor police to a crane mechanic, and they talk about what their jobs like, the jobs they need, the skill set, so that we can make them aware of it coming out of high school. And so I think it's all exposure.
Mary Beth, may I chime in? Thank you. I had the opportunity last year, well, just before the pandemic, to participate in a program in Newark to really educate young people in the community about job opportunities in the harbor. And they were delighted because this is an area that they're surrounded by, but they didn't really know much about it. And I think it led us in both the private and the public sectors to have people start feeding into job application processes. I want to pick up further on what Brandy said. I do think we need to work through our own organizations, not just our ports, but through organizations like AAPA, TRB, ILWU, ILA, Teamsters, the logistics companies, to promote and broadcast the amazing achievements and careers of women and people of color who are in our organizations today. And I think if we use social media effectively, we can begin to reach out to younger people who may not have been aware of the kinds of opportunities that we may have available to them. And I think we ought to promote the roles targeting, as Brandy suggested, juniors and seniors in high school, young people in community colleges in particular, because they are attuned more to some of the apprentice opportunities that could be available through our unions or through our business and industry development organizations. And of course, I would go for the university transportation centers because listening to Helen and Lauren, I was thinking about this. They focus on public transit and on aviation, but not on maritime. They leave that to the maritime academies. Well, that's a mistake. We really need to have all of the disciplines represented in our communities. I also think, I mentioned it, tuition refund, but I also think that if that's part of our culture and part of what the benefits are of our organization, we need to promote that and make it well known that people can continue their lifelong learning. They're going to have episodes throughout their careers of the need to have more formalized education. And what a better way to obtain it than through their career, through their workplace. And additionally, I think our pitch needs to be on inclusivity. We provide services that are going to meet the needs of the community and the region. Our facilities don't exist in a vacuum. So why do we exclude from our workforce people who can bring us commitment, skills, and best minds? We should look for and welcome the best talent available. And I think we do that by showing off the culture of our organizations. People want to work with people and for people who value curiosity, innovation, creativity, engagement, and occasionally failure. If we can show them that, we fail, we pick ourselves up, we brush ourselves off, and we go right back at it, we're going to get people interested. They're going to say, hey, you know what? If they're willing to allow me to fail once in a while, maybe not big catastrophes, but why not? Why wouldn't I want to work there? So just some thoughts.
Mary Beth?
Yeah, Phyllis, yes, go for it.
At Port Freeport, we try to employ a couple of high school students part-time during the summers. It's really hard for kids to find part-time jobs, and what a great way to get them out to the port and actually see what's happening and inspire them. And we also try to hire at least one college intern each year. And we've hired some of those interns, and that's been very successful for us. And, and what better spokesman than after that is to have them speak on behalf of the port and engage with high school tours and, and in the community, because let's face it, people enjoy listening to our speeches, but, we really get inspired by the young up and coming people that are, finding their way in their careers. So I utilize them as much as I can to engage our community and engage at the universities and our local community colleges. And then we also have tuition reimbursement programs because, again, I'm a fan for every employee at Port Freeport. I want them to succeed. I want them to excel and find that opportunity. And I speak just to the women periodically each year, in March, to tell them that I'm sincere about that. And if they're not sure how to go about that or what their path ought to be, that I'm willing to help them find that path. And the more that we engage in the community, I'm never comfortable talking about me. I'm really about the board and about my team. So this has been something I've had to get more accustomed to. But as I have gotten comfortable, there are other people that I know in the communities, they reach out and say, will you just spend an hour on the phone with my daughter, trying to give them some direct CEO experience. And when I'm asked, I do step up to do that because, I've always appreciated when others tried to help make a path for my children. So I try to return that. And I think if we all do that, we can really make a difference. It's not always the big programs. It's the simple things that you can do each and every day. Just being, just being kind and compassionate and willing to try to inspire others.
Wonderful.
I'd like to just real quickly, just to finish
ahead,
up,
Helen.
because that's a really good segue, because I was going to say that to the extent that sometimes it's grassroots, right? We think about these big ideas and so on, but it is sometimes very much one person at a time. So in federal government, I have interns, whether they're undergraduate interns or postgrad fellows, I look at every individual as an opportunity to let them understand what maritime transportation is about. And then ultimately, I'm hoping those folks will go into other agencies or go to the Hill, and then they walk in having an innate understanding, so they're not surprised when something comes across their desk. And I, after a couple of years of doing this, and of course making yourself available on panels, you just never know. That one person becomes two, and they domino. So I think it's important not to be overly, stressed when we can't make huge strides in big ways, because every individual that you talk to is a way forward. And I appreciate the comments about, I think those interns, really spread the word in lots of different ways. And, we may not think about it today, but certainly over the years. Thanks.
Thanks, Helen. I would just add to that, just to think about the apprenticeship as another opportunity. It's something that's becoming near and dear to my heart. It's something that we've been taking on at AAPA. I even see that Barbara Marie, our executive director for Accelerate, is on the call, but that's a wonderful way to get women engaged in the industry. And we've had a lot of success. In fact, Barbara and I did a quick tour of a welding, it was a remote or a mobile welding lab. And then we went in and followed up with some of the training. And one of the people that was there, out of 6 people, there was a woman who was getting her welding certification. She was going to move on to the shipyard after her certification. So, I just encourage you to think about that. We'll do a great job of that at AAPA, hopefully engaging all of you in those kinds of conversations, but it is another great pathway. And I think Lauren wanted to add something as well.
Oh, thank you, Mary Beth. So Victoria Rodriguez, I see that she's on the line. Victoria, put your video on if you're comfortable doing so. But she's part of our team here at the National Association of Waterfront Employers, and we also manage the National Maritime Safety Association. And Victoria found that there are no land-based maritime job sites, with the exception of AAPA's, and that the maritime sites otherwise are all for shipboard or waterborne jobs. So Victoria started at www.nmsa.us, a job board. And we only have one job on it so far. It's so new, it's been up less than 30 days, but we also post resumes, no charge for the resumes. And Victoria just had an initiative to help people go out and get jobs in this industry. Victoria, if I could ask you to just say a couple sentences about what you think about the industry.
Hello, everyone. My name is Victoria Rodriguez. I'm here with the National Association of Waterfront Employers. I've been in this industry for about going on 2 years now, and I am delighted to be here. One thing that I quickly noticed that of this industry, that there was a lack of diversity or jobs just open available to the public, and I really wanted to be a middleman that could offer that to the public. I would hear in many meetings that terminal operators are looking for drivers and people to do different jobs that don't require a degree. And I just want to make that more aware to the public. So I thought it would be really cool to make this available for the maritime industry and open it up to more people so that we can have a more diverse group.
That's wonderful, Victoria, and great idea. And let's talk.
Yes, I would love to.
Anyone else want to finish up with that question? Lori, I feel like I didn't give you an opportunity if you wanted to say anything about that last question. I think you're muted though.
I think just getting out in the community, like the others talked about, getting out in the community, and when you're asked to speak, I'm not always comfortable speaking either about myself, but I think it's important for people to see us and, just being real with, the struggles that we go through and seeing that there's someone that you can call upon. But I also like what Phyllis said, sometimes I've gotten calls from either family members or my coworkers, some of their kids, and I'll talk with them and give them advice along the way. And I think that sometimes it's just it's a one-on-one, and the word just kind of spreads. It's important for to treat each person, give them the time that they need, and give them the advice and help them in their career path. So that's kind of what I've done here at the port.
That's great, Lori. Yeah, I think you're right. Sometimes it doesn't have to be super complicated. I mean, a lot of times it can just be answering that call, someone sends you an email, saying, hey,
Right.
it's in your industry, I'd love to just learn more. Would you be willing to talk with me or meet me for coffee? If the answer is yes, I think that can be very inspiring to others, and they ultimately pay it forward. So I think that's great. Well, we're coming up on about almost 90 minutes. It's hard to believe this has gone so fast. I appreciate everybody's engagement and hanging on, but I'd like to close it out with one last question. This was sort of designed to be, kind of the wrap-up question. So if each of the panelists could just sort of maybe take a minute to answer this closing comment, I'd appreciate it. And then we can kind of wrap up. Again, just as a reminder, if you know of someone who missed the webinar and wants to be able to view it, we have it recorded, so be able to share that with folks. Also, please do not hesitate to reach out to any of our panelists. It sounds like they all are very interested in helping, supporting, giving advice, giving guidance. So please feel free to reach out after this call, and I'm sure any one of the folks that spoke would be happy to put you in contact with the right person or talk to you about some of the things you're curious about. But let's wrap up with this final question. Let's discuss just for a minute, what is one thing you would like to leave with us today, like in your closing thoughts, that could make a difference to our future women in transportation leaders? Or as I like to say, and Eric was, I think I kind of stumped him on this one, but what's a little life hack or little tip or trick that you've learned along the way that has served you in your career? So let's just wrap up with, what's something that could make a difference for somebody who's on their journey and headed towards transportation as a career, or a life hack, some tip or trick that you feel like helped you build your career. And why don't we start with Sade?
Sure. So my life hack would be to create core questions for yourself that help guide your decisions. So I have 3 that I ask myself professionally, personally. I use them pretty much every day for most decisions I make. It's, am I building my net? Am I Swiss cheesing? And could I know more about this subject? And I'll tell you what they mean so it doesn't just sound strange. Am I building my net? I think about my community as my net. So am I building relationships, connections? Am I putting into my community? Am I getting involved? Because I think the stronger your net is, the more resilient you'll be when you have to lean on that net, and they help you bounce back when you make a bad decision, which you will because you're human. But the stronger your net is, the more likely you are to bounce back, and they'll be behind you and have your back. And am I Swiss cheesing? That's the idea that I think of myself as a piece of Swiss cheese. I have gaps, knowledge gaps, skill gaps, but if I team up with Mary Beth, she's another piece of Swiss cheese, and then everyone else on the panel, and you pile it up, and there's less holes because you're filling each other's gaps and working collaboratively to be a stronger unit. So it's more, it's the idea that it's not about you, it's about the group, and to focus on that. And then my last one, could I know more about this subject? The answer is always yes. So it just helps me push myself to keep learning more. And there's so many resources out there that allow you to do that, especially during the pandemic, that it helps me move forward every day.
Helen, do you want to go next?
Oh, sure. Do every single job, no matter how small or how big, as if it's the most important job in your life, because details really matter. People can be judged by the quality of their work, but quality of your work can be in all kinds of things. The correct way you send an email to somebody by asking instead of telling. The fact, making sure that your grammar is correct in a product, doing your homework, recognizing that some of your best work can come from teamwork, but do every single thing as if it's the most important, because it will reflect very positively on you. And I really do believe then you get recognized. Because half the time, giving somebody a job, especially if you want to jump in and volunteer for it, and I'm a big believer that you should volunteer for as much as you can, as long as it doesn't sacrifice your day job, because that's where you really build skills and meet new people. It's important that at some point, though, if they see that your work is really, really good, that's when they trust you. They always say, if you want to get something done, give it to a busy person. That's because that person can get stuff done. And honestly, be that person, because people will immediately become dependent upon you and recognize how valuable you are. Thank you.
Yes, agreed. Lori, do you want to respond to those closing questions?
I think it's important when, if you give your word to someone, or if you make a commitment to always follow through no matter what. I'll echo what Helen said earlier, that it's important to give your all in any task, because you're putting yourself out there with everything that you do. And let's face it, you're being judged. And so it's important to give your all. I think you need to be a trustworthy person. If you give your word to somebody, you need to always follow through, and it's important to ask questions. If you don't know something, then you need to ask questions. I do believe in fake it till you make it, but I also, I think that it's important to ask questions. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there and to learn new things. I think that's very important.
Laura, that's a great point. And I feel like sometimes the younger folks that I've worked with are so afraid to ask because they don't want to seem silly or, oh, that's a dumb question. And yet if they just asked, it would clarify so much of the project or whatever they're working on, and it would help them to move forward and be more successful. So I agree with you. Always be willing to ask questions.
Can you listen me?
Yes.
Hello?
Oh, sure. Yes, go for it.
Yeah, I'm Zarna Bhatt. I'm coordinator at Risk Construction Management, Lamar University. I did my bachelor's from India and master's from India, then work in Middle East and now in USA. So I want to say that for our field, my bachelor's is in civil engineering. I can say team, time, and training. These three is so important, and particularly we leaders should motivate maximum number of the girls, particularly in this region, Golden Triangle, because I can figure it out in my program, very less number of the girls are there. So we need to work in team and reach out to the maximum STEM courses which girls are taking, and we should pull it them with our team. So this is very important, and thanks for today's meeting. It's really all speakers. I enjoyed a lot. Thank you.
Thanks for adding that. Was really helpful. I wrote that down actually.
NDM bit.
Brandy, do you want to answer the final question?
I think a couple of the panelists touched on this, but the thing I always try to focus on and tell myself every day is you can do anything. I think women so often will be our worst own critic. And I think others alluded to this, that we would be more unlikely to apply for a position or a leadership role than our male counterpart. They'll more likely throw their hat in the ring. I think early on in my career, I was more introverted. I was very analytical. I wanted, to be comfortable, confident on a topic and issue before I volunteered for something. And early on, I learned volunteer for everything. So within my organization, if there was a project that was going afoul, that it needed rescuing, put up your hand, volunteer for the project. I found myself rescuing IT implementations, but it provided not only experience for myself, but also visibility to leadership